Alright, so we are in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. I've got the 172 selected that we're flying. Right now they don't support multiple monitors, so that kind of sucks. I've let it sit here for a few minutes because the detail and stuff that they show inside of their presentation videos that they've been putting out all over the internet, they're not really as clear as what they advertised. The graphics they're a lot nicer than X-Plane, but they're very, very slow. It takes a lot of processing to deal with all this stuff, and I've got a pretty substantial computer, but I may end up having to update it to take advantage of everything that this thing does. But you can see, looking out on the runway, the thing, it's pretty cool. So we're at KFPR Fort Pierce in Florida, and we're just going to take off and fly around the pattern and come back around and land and kind of see how it does. We've got the standard instruments down here. I'm not sure when you're zooming in and out on this thing. I've got the button, so like for example, this puts me up here, and so instead of it zooming around, it actually changes the entire view, so I'm not having to zoom in and out. It's actually doing it for me. So and you'll notice the yoke is out of the way in this particular view so that I can see more of the radios. My 530 that I have from Real Sim gear doesn't work in here. I'm not sure what it's going to take to, because in X-Plane, when you click on the instrument, it actually pops up a bigger view, and in here it doesn't do anything. So I've lost a good bit of functionality that I had. So we'll just have to kind of play around with this. And then you can push a button and it automatically resets you back to a particular view. Let's see if I can, there we go. So at this point, what we're going to do is release the brakes, which I'm trying to remember, I think it's number 6 or some crazy thing. We'll see what happens here. See if it'll start taxiing. Let's say the brakes are still on. Or let's see, maybe this guy. It's a little, there we go. Alright, so we're just gonna try to go straight down the runway here and see how this goes. I do have a little bit of a curve that I added to the controls because they were a little extremely sensitive by default. And again, we're in a 172. Pull back here, get it on 70. Get the trim set. Alright. And you can see there's actual trees out here. It's pretty cool. Here's a better view, and you can see how choppy all the graphics are. And I've got a high-end graphics card, so that definitely is not the issue on that side. So there's obviously a lot of work getting done by the CPU that's causing this thing to be so choppy. So that part of it is a little disappointing. You can also notice the detail in the trees are you know, they're better than what X-Plane does, but they're not, you know, not that much different. Looks like I got my flaps down here, if I can figure out how to put them back up. There we go. So we'll get back in the, well, I thought we'd get back in the airplane. Alright. We'll keep climbing. So I'm going to turn here. We're going to come back around and try to land on that same runway. Flying the airplane is, I've gotten X-Plane extremely nailed down, so it really flies extremely good. This is going to take a little bit of work, and this is also, you know, they just released this, but they have been doing a lot of testing, so I kind of expected a little bit more than what I'm getting. And again, you know, the detail here is a little disappointing because the trees don't really look very good. I don't know how good it's going to show up in the video, but the you know, you can see the city over here, and it looks like just a bunch of white mess, just strictly because it's not, I guess maybe it hasn't updated yet. So if I fly around here for a little bit, supposedly it'll get better. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and pull this back a little bit. I've got the runway down here that we took off on, so we'll turn back this way a little bit. So the choppiness you can kind of see because it's, you know, it's kind of jumping around a little bit, and I think that's all due to the graphics, because it's not there's no other reason for it. So you can see, you know, the houses and schools and all that stuff down on the ground. It's pretty cool. And I tell you, I'm gonna, once I get done landing here, we're gonna go and pull it up in X-Plane, and we'll fly the same little pattern in X-Plane and see what the difference is there. All right, so we're gonna make our little turn here. Get a notch of flaps. And so putting the flaps down definitely was more realistic in here, because I don't know if you remember, but putting the flaps down in X-Plane causes the thing to balloon like you just grabbed hold of a space rocket. This is going to be a little bit tougher. And you can see, you know, the house detail and pools, and, you know, so there's a lot of detail here that you don't get in X-Plane. Looks like I've already gone past the airport, so let's get a turn around here. I'm used to having I'm gonna go ahead and get all my flaps. So the reaction on putting the flaps down is a whole lot more realistic than what we're getting in X-Plane. Get her on about 80 here. And again, that jumpiness is, I think, the result of the CPU on the card and something it's doing, trying to get all this graphic stuff displayed. And you can see the, the airport out here. I mean, everything is pretty realistic. It's a little jumpy. So that was a successful takeoff and landing. And again, the airport doesn't look exactly like this, but it's pretty close. It's not too bad. So what we're going to do now is we're going to stop this one and we'll go pull this up in X-Plane and take a look at what it looks like when we do the same thing. Alright, so now we're in X-Plane and we're at KFPR again. You'll notice nothing looks the same. The graphics outside, the scenery that's outside is, the trees look all flat. The runway, it looks okay, but it doesn't look anything like what it did in X-Plane. So X-Plane definitely, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 definitely has a whole different level of scenery. Now, and hopefully, eventually it'll have support for real sim gear and all the other stuff. Right now, we're lacking all that. So I would still fly X-Plane right now just simply because of that. But you'll notice the airplane itself, the cockpit. Now I'm not showing the other two screens. I do have a full screen here, but you'll notice everything's not quite as crisp and clean looking. It's not as realistic looking as it was in Flight Simulator. So we're going to go ahead and take off and fly around the field and see what it looks like when we're actually flying. So it's not nearly as jumpy and stuff in here as it is in the flight sim. So we have the tower over here, and I'm going to try to go up and land on that same runway that we did a minute ago, just because we are on a different runway and you can't see it at the moment, but the airport itself is not nearly as realistic as what it was over in Flight Sim, which you'll see here in just a minute. And I don't know why it's so hazy outside. Of course, it is sadly pretty realistic. X-Plane had a very crisp day, and normally Florida isn't very crisp. So, but you notice we've got the, of course you're not going to see it, so I'll try to turn over here and so you can kind of see some of the houses and stuff that you've got over here on the ground. There's trees and there's houses and all that stuff, but it's not nearly as realistic looking as what the flight simulator is. So we're going to go ahead and turn over here. Now the airplane does fly better in X-Plane. It's a little bit more realistic feeling. What we're going to do is we're going to go out here, get up about 1,500 feet. We'll pull it back. And also I've got real weather turned on so in here, so I'm actually, this is what it should more realistically look like down there. But the houses and all that stuff that you have outside, the trees, everything looks pretty flat and just like stuck in the ground. It's not nearly as realistic looking. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get a notch of flaps here, and you see how this thing pitches up. The airplane does pitch up, but to me that's a little dramatic the way that it does that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to fly over here and land on that same runway that we landed on. I'm not really worried about doing an exact traffic pattern. And having my 530 over here on my panel that I can actually work the buttons on versus having to click up on the screen to do everything is a huge selling point. So, and I typically fly more for the instrument side of things than I do for just getting in here and putting around. But I have to say, if the flight simulator actually gets to where it's downloading the data to where it looks real, I can see how that would get quite addictive, especially to people that don't fly all the time. Just being able to get in an airplane and actually see the land and what's around them, that's pretty intense. Now, one of the downsides, one of the things that I thought was really missing in Flight Sim 2020 is the graphics and stuff. While it's supposedly downloading the stuff in the background, it doesn't give you any feedback at all as to what it is doing, and so you're kind of left sitting there wondering if that's as good as it's going to get, or if you let it sit longer, will it get better? So it's kind of like zero feedback on what's going on in the background, and as a result you're just left disappointed. So if I knew that it was 50% downloading the realistic content, then I may be more apt to sit and let it do something. But as it stands, you don't really know what the heck it's doing. So you can see here the city landscape and everything out here isn't nearly what it was in the other simulator. And here's the airport coming up here. This is the runway that we were landing on. At least I think it was. It may not be. It's hard to tell because the airport is completely unrealistic. I think this is the runway we were landing on. Yeah. So there's the pad over on the right over there with all the hangars on it. And then you've got the main airport over here, but you'll notice there's just not a whole lot of detail. It's not bad, before Flight Sim 2020 came out. It's pretty impressive, but it's not nearly as realistic. So what we're going to do after I land here, we'll go back over to Flight Sim, do one more test over there, and let it sit for a few more minutes and see if the landscape gets any better than what it already is. But you'll see the buildings here, the runway. It's missing a lot of detail that you'll pick up here when we go back over to Microsoft. But this, this entire experience is a whole lot more realistic, except for the damn tire squealing. I hate that. I wish they'd do away with that sound effect. But flying this was a whole lot more enjoyable than flying in Microsoft Flight Simulator. But let's jump back over to Microsoft Flight Simulator and do one more run in it and see if we let it sit for a few minutes what it looks like. All right, so a couple things. It takes about 5 minutes from the time you click on the icon to start running 2020 to the time it comes up to the menu where you can go in and set up your airplane and your airport and all that kind of stuff. So 5 minutes just to start the game, and then another minute and a half to 2 minutes from the time you pick your airplane and tell it to fly until it brings you up to where you can actually start flying. So there is a considerable amount of time it takes to get this game up and running. Not a huge deal considering what it's doing, but it is worth mentioning. Now, we're sitting here on the runway. There is no real world weather option that I can find, so I really don't have a whole lot of options as to how I want the weather to look. I can tell it I want it to rain or I want it to be cloudy or whatever, but that's about the extent. So right now we got a clear sky, and you notice there's no haze between this and what we were doing in X-Plane. So they're not completely fair in that respect because of that. However, you'll notice the tower down at the end of the runway down there. It's a more realistic looking tower. It's not as tall as it was in X-Plane. The hangars and stuff that we have over here are also, I don't know, I guess I can look out the left wing, but I lose a little bit of the, so it's about all I can do. So it's hard to tell, but you see the runway, the asphalt out there looks more realistic. It's pretty impressive. Now I've let it sit here for a couple minutes, so we're just gonna go fly and see, if it makes any difference from what we were doing earlier. So I think that's what I did for the brakes. Let's see if the brakes are off. I've got the sound turned down at the moment. There we go. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and take off. I'm having to put in a whole lot more rudder in this to keep it on the runway here. Well, no, it straightened itself out, so it's pretty good there. So again, we're going to try to take off and come around and fly like we did on the other one. But it doesn't fly bad. Everything is fairly realistic. It's not quite as good as it is on X-Plane, but I'm sure that kind of thing will get better. You can see it's still kind of stuttering out here. With turning and everything else. And again, you'll notice there's just no feedback as to what is going on and why is it so stuttery, because at some point it quits doing this. But right now it's terrible, and I do have a high-end graphics card in here. CPU is 5 years old, but the actual graphics card is brand new. I just put a new graphics card in it. So, X-Plane runs perfectly well in here, but I don't know. This has a whole lot more graphics and stuff going on. So if you think you're going to download this and run it on your home computer that you just have sitting over on your desk, it's probably not going to happen. So there's the airport. So you can see what the airport looks like over there. It's not, not too bad. In fact, it's fairly accurate. It's just, either way you look at it, this is impressive as hell that they have this much detail showing up in here. I wish I had some feedback to know when it was done downloading everything in this area, and then how far out does it download when you're flying around this airport. Because if I knew as long as I stayed within 5 miles of the airport, that I'm gonna, you know, get rid of all this stuttering and downloading and whatever else is going on, then I could deal with that. So there is the runway we're going to be landing on. We're about out here far enough. So now we're going to pull back a little bit. We'll go ahead and make our base leg. We'll get a notch of flaps. And again, when you get the flaps, the nose does come up, but not as dramatic as it is in X-Plane. But the houses and swimming pools and trees and the water, you know, the sun glistening off the ocean out there. I mean, that stuff is just pretty dang crazy. I mean, you look at the detail in the houses. It's even got bug smears on the window. I mean, it's it's pretty crazy. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get another notch of flaps. Go ahead and start our turn. I'll tell you what, we know what it's going to be like for landing. Let's in the rest of this one, let's go fly down the beach or something and see how things look. So we're a couple 100 feet off the ground here, and I mean, you look at the sun and the dash. I mean, this is some impressive work to get this much detail in here. You can see the ripples in the water. I mean, just the sun reflecting off the window, inside of the window. It'd be cooler if we had 3 monitors. I don't know how long it's going to be before they get all that done. But you can see the waves, you know, the water down there. So this is the inlet side. So you can see the hotels and stuff. So let's go out here on the actual beach side. So I can honestly say, you know, based on, and you see the reflection off the water out there. I mean, it's very realistic. I mean, this is really impressive. So, you know, once they get to the point where I've got 3 monitors and can actually use my 530 on the other box here instead of having to do it on the screen, I'm definitely going to be looking at this being a serious contender for what I practice in. The jittering back and forth, I may be able to upgrade my computer a little bit and get some of that taken care of. But you got the beach out here. You got the houses on the beach and the waves coming up on the beach. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff. So definitely not anything to knock. It's like I said, it's a little jittery, so it makes it a little tough to fly. But it's actually not bad, you know, considering what it's doing. So You know, it's not unflyable. It's just a little irritating. But my biggest thing is it would be nice if I had an indicator up here as to what it's doing. Like, is it downloading a bunch of detail, you know, a bunch of files right now, and that's why it's running so sluggish? And if that's the case, you know, I would actually just let the game sit and download more detail and then come back. The cars and stuff down there are really bad looking. But you know, I guess the next step is going to be to kind of fly around down here for a little bit and see how long it takes it to actually download more of the textures so that it's not having to work the CPU so hard. I can see the airport light over there blinking on and off. I mean, it's pretty impressive, people. If you want to fly an airplane and see what it really looks like outside, this is about as close as you're going to get. It's definitely, I'm sure the people over at X-Plane are a little panicked right now for how they're going to step up their game, because this is definitely a whole new world. So if they get the monitor support, the extra, you know, instruments and stuff, the external side of this stuff done where you can actually do all that kind of stuff, this is going to be the closest thing to a real airplane that you're ever going to get, as long as everything flies good. And right now I'm pretty impressed. I mean, right out of the box, I haven't made very many adjustments at all, and everything is flying really good. I mean, it's not near as aggravating as it was when I was initially getting started with X-Plane. So we'll go over here and do us a landing. In fact, I'm not even gonna, what we'll do is throw some flaps down and land on the other runway so we don't have to fly all the way around the airport. In fact, we'll land and taxi up to the FBO, see if we can find it here. So they even have the other smaller runway over here on the back cut out. This is going to be a pretty tight landing. So we got the flaps down. Tell you what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna land on this other runway, and that way we don't have to taxi so far. All right. We'll get off the runway right here. See what the, So we got the custom stuff over here on the right. There's a restaurant somewhere down here. I'm not sure. The FBO may be up at the other end. I haven't been to this airport enough to know where everything is, but you know, we had a forklift out here on the runway. He stopped for us. That's nice of him. So I don't know if this is where the restaurant is normally at. I mean, these buildings are not totally realistic, and you know, so one of the things that's interesting is they're at an airport and they're building these buildings, and I guess they're doing it dynamically as you're going in here, but they have buildings in the right spots, but they actually build houses instead of hangars, and so it's, you know, a little weird in some places. But overall, for the first, you know, release of this 2020 Microsoft Flight Simulator, this thing is just wow. It's really, really impressive. So hope y'all enjoyed it, and we'll do some more flying. You know, I think I'm gonna let it download, see what the heck it's doing, and see if we can get the stutter out of it, and then I'll come back and do some more videos once we get that figured out. But I'm just blown away at the level of detail here.